This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand
Welcome to today's meeting of the Housing Committee. Members of the public may like to follow at London Assembly on social media and use the hashtag London Housing for this meeting. Please can I remind participants to silence your devices. Our main item of business today is the discussion of the Mayor's affordable housing delivery. Before we begin, we have a few short items of business. Can I ask our clerk, Diane Richards, if there's any apologies received?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received today from Assembly Member Small Edwards, for whom Assembly Member Baker will be substituting.
Thank you. So item number 2, declarations of interest. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out in item 2 and ask members if they have any interest to declare? No, noted. And item 3, can I ask the committee to note the outstanding actions arising from its previous meeting and the additional correspondence received? No? Great. So, on to our main item of business, the Mayor's affordable housing delivery. Today's discussion is split into 2 panels. So our first panel is with us this morning. So we've got, from right to left, we've got Tom Oliver, Development Programme Director at Peabody. Tracy Cullen, Chief Executive and Board Member of Croydon Churches Housing Association, Barbara Richardson, Managing Director at Square Roots, and Heather Thomas, Chief Executive at Sapphire Independent Housing. So welcome to all of the guests. I'm going to kick us off with questions and then members will come in throughout the discussion and we'll run to about 11:15. So just to kick us off, what has been your experience working with the GLA and delivering homes under the Affordable Homes Programme 2021 to 2026? And Heather, I might come to you and start at that end. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for inviting me to speak this morning. Just a bit about my organisation. You might know we're a smaller, very small, under 1,000 homes provider in North West London, known for our supported housing. However, our programme under the AHAP 21 to 2026 has been general needs housing, and broadly speaking, we are positive about it. I would say that we had an allocation under the previous programme, which was at tariff grant rates, and that was quite difficult to deliver. So in comparison, the 21 to 26 programme has been more positive. I'm sure you'll go on to ask, but just extensively, we welcome the return to social rents. That's been positive, and obviously the higher grant rates that comes with that. I would just add one caveat, though, with rising prices, which you'll know about. It is still quite difficult to deliver schemes where we have to acquire sites and develop out at some of the grant rates that are available just due to rising costs.
Great, thank you. We've got loads of questions to follow up, but that's a really good headline summary. Barbara.
Morning, thank you, Chair. Square Roots is a registered provider. We're relatively young. We're only established in 2021 and have an ambition to do about 1,000 homes a year across London, across the capital. Our 21-26 programme contained 512 units in total, all for social rent, so quite challenging. The teams we worked with were incredibly supportive. They understood the difficulties in the market conditions. They understood the difficulties in acquiring land on the open market and the kind of grant rates that need to support not just build cost but potentially land cost as well. But in general, very supportive. The negotiated grant rates, whilst they take a little bit longer to get a decision on, because obviously there has to be due diligence on value for money and viability assessment, are definitely more positive than a fixed grant rate that made it quite challenging in the previous programme, albeit the previous programme was focused mainly on shared ownership. So fundamentally, that was easier from a viability point of view.
Great nods from your fellow panel members. Tracy, coming to you.
Good morning, Chair. CCHA are a small housing provider, 1,600 homes, over 4 boroughs, but predominantly in Croydon. In the last programme, the 1623, we delivered 105 homes, and we have a moderate programme of 25 homes a year, and under the new programme as well, the 21-26. Generally, we have found the flexible grant rates a real advantage for us. I would say the stability of the previous programme I found much easier to deal with. As a small association, I think there have been quite a few changes and quite short notice announcements that have been quite, for a small association, quite hard to manage. So responding quickly when you don't have a development team, we actually use Islington and Shoreditch to support us as a development partner. And we've always worked with development partners, but are an investment partner in our own right. Can be a little bit, can take longer. And as Barbara said, the negotiated rates, while it's a much more pragmatic approach, and I would welcome that going forward, it does take a bit more time. Saying that we are delivering, and we're able to deliver a programme this 2021-26 of two strands, really. So we have new opportunities coming through, and we also have existing sites. And that's where the flexible grant rates have really helped. So the existing sites that we've got are obviously cheaper per unit. So we're, our GLA partner has been really supportive, and we've had lower grant rates on those, but actually been slightly higher grant rates on new opportunities, which are extremely competitive in the current market we're in.
Thank you. Tom.
So Peabody's a registered provider with 100,000 homes across London and the South East, and our programme with the GLA in 21-26 is 1,000 homes. I think I'd agree with everything that's been said so far. I think that indicative start point of the programme, which gives you the overall allocation, is a really good place to start, and then it allows you to sort of have the knowledge that you can plan ahead on the basis of those sort of indicative allocations rather than the tariff rate. So I'd certainly push for that in any future programme. I think the flexibility that's shown by the GLA team as you go through the programme is really welcome in terms of understanding the different types of schemes that will come forward across the course of a programme. But I think overall, sort of recognising that the programme is existing in a time of constrained capacity for a lot of registered providers. So there has been a sort of focus on our existing investment into our existing homes, which has obviously naturally meant that we haven't started as many homes as we would have wanted to. However, we are progressing with our programme, and we'd hope to deliver the outcomes that the GLA are looking for by the end of the programme.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, we've got lots of questions to get into some of the detail of what you've been describing. So I'm going to hand over to Assemblymember Cooper for the next questions.
Thank you very much. I think I'm pretty clear about your starts that you were talking about. Where are we in terms of completions over this period of the programme, 21 to 26? If I just go along from Heather onwards and just go back down the line as we did, how many completions did you manage during that period?
We haven't completed any homes under the 21 to 26 programme. Can I just say that there's been a kind of a merging, because the 16 to 21 programme became the 16 to 23 programme. Yeah. So under that programme, we have had 52 homes completed under 16 to 23. Under the 21 to 26 programme, we only have 39 units, but that's a lot for us because we're very small. 9 are currently on site, and the remainder are due to go on site before the end of this calendar year.
But no completions yet?
No completions yet.
Barbara, what about Square Roots? How many completions have you managed? I think you said you had 512 units, all of social rent.
512 all social rent in this programme. None of them have completed yet. It's across 2 sites, so they're quite large sites, so construction periods are relatively long. We do have the challenges, obviously, of awaiting Gateway 2 approvals on those sites. So they are all due to complete by the deadline date of March 2030, and we're pretty sure they will be completed by then. But we have external challenges that are not within the GLA's gift of control that we need to work with. Under the 1621 programme, we had over 1,015 units funded, and 437 of those are completed, and some of those are still finishing off now.
Okay, it sounds like there's a sort of common theme there between Square Root and SAFA. What about CCHT? Did you manage any completions from this
Similar
programme?
story.
21, 26?
We have 53 committed to or on site already. We only got our grant allocation approved in July 23. So for a small association, we wouldn't have been willing to commit to new opportunities prior to that grant allocation, even though, as we said, the team were extremely supportive until you've got that definite. We couldn't. In terms of our existing sites, of which a proportion of those are, and it's one of the challenges that we face is planning, and we do welcome the government's planning reform.
I'll come on to that in a minute.
Okay.
Tom, what about you in terms of completions?
Yeah, so completions, we haven't completed any as yet, and the first completions will come through this financial year on the first site.
So none completed as yet?
Yeah, I just re-emphasise the point about the overlap of the programmes.
I know, yeah. But I've just wondered whether you've managed to complete any from the 21-26 programme yet. We discussed accessibility standards in a previous meeting, and it seems as though a lot of developments are not meeting the sort of 10% rule, if you like. Do you record, and I'll start with Tom and work back down the line, do you record how many of your units are accessible?
We don't on the GLA system, I don't believe, but we will have it through the planning documentation.
Sure, but people go back to planning and get planning consents adjusted all the time, don't they? Tracy, is that something CCHT records?
On the system, because Islington and Shoreditch do our submission for us, I couldn't 100% tell you. I can certainly find out. In terms of our developments, Croydon have quite a high bar when it comes to accessible units. Their aspiration is 30%. So I can confirm that all of our schemes will have at least a 10% accessible units. But I appreciate I will need to find out whether that's been put on the system.
That would be really helpful, actually, if you could. Barbara, do you
So yes, we do log ours on the GLA system, on OPS, so that they form part of our audit compliance checklist.
Great.
We have, on all of our sites, we have a minimum of 10%, which is accessible and adaptable. On 338 units which are coming through in the 21-26 programme, we have over 41 units on there that are actually accessible and fully adapted at day one to wheelchair standards. So obviously there is that difference between accessible and adaptable for the future and actually adapted as of today.
Yeah.
So where we can, where the local authority demonstrates the need for us, we will always try and factor the fully adapted in at day one. But we will always, every single project we do will have 10% accessible and adaptable and 90% accessible.
Great. And Heather, is that the same for SAFA?
I believe we do record them on the system, but I can confirm that after the meeting. I don't believe under our programme we are meeting the 10% target. I think we're probably at 5% in terms of accessible units. We have a programme of 103, so it would be 5% of that.
Okay. I'm going to throw this open to all of you and then see who would like to answer it. Not necessarily all of you, but have you faced particular challenges delivering some types and some tenures of housing? And I would imagine supported, for example, is quite difficult. But Tom, you're nodding?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that supported housing is doesn't form a big part of our pipeline. Is quite difficult. We do have specific extra care homes delivered with support from the programme at St John's Wood. I think there's a question later on about the different types of tenures, but London Living Rent hasn't formed a big part of our programme either. So I think our focus has been on social rent and shared ownership units.
So London living rent, not a big part, but social rented and shared ownership more. Okay, so that's interesting. Any other thoughts about what's difficult to develop? I can see Barbara is... Oh,
Yeah,
and
just-
Heather.
Of course.
Yes, thank you.
Picking up on Tom's point, we've avoided London living rent as a tenure for two key reasons. One, it's quite difficult to fund, and a lot of our funding is institutional investment, and it's neither one product or the other. It's a rent to begin with and then a buy later on, so that's quite difficult sometimes to put private equity funding behind. And the other reason, more importantly actually from our board point of view, is that we don't want to be in a position in 10 years' time if one of our customers has aspired to purchase and then finds themselves in a position where they can't, and we find ourselves in a position where we need to exit them from that property, which we find unpalatable, really. So we have kind of avoided that tenure because of that factor involved in it and because of the funding element of it too.
Thanks. Heather,
But we're focused on every kind of rented tenure,
Sure.
social rented, London affordable rent when it was in the previous programme, and shared ownership. Intermediate rented tenure is a really good tenure as well,
Yeah.
which I think the GLA are looking at for key workers.
And Heather, you wanted to come in.
Yes, the point I was going to make, and I'm glad you've asked the question, is supported housing. We are and started off as a supported housing provider as Sapphire, but we would love to develop supported housing. And it's not that the capital grant is not available under the GLA, it's just that the revenue support side is really the issue. Supported housing providers, A, are pulling out, as you probably know, and B, that they're doing that because of concerns about, A, the fact there's no increase in revenue funding, and the fact that the revenue funding grant, when it is commissioned, is not ring-fenced. And so that is really a barrier to expanding the provision of supported housing.
Okay. Obviously, one of the financial constraints on an organisation overall has been the call on funds for doing remediation works to existing stocks, which I think one of you referred to and said, obviously, that's been quite an issue. Now that the government has announced equal access for social housing providers to the Building Safety Fund, is that going to allow for an increase in new units, do you think? Tracy?
So simply speaking from the L12 point of view, which CCHA are a member of, in terms of building safety, we don't have a specific issue with issues with high-rise buildings. So for us, it didn't affect our development programme. In terms of L12, overall, they have a significant, and I'm sure some of you will be aware that L12 have been campaigning quite strongly on building safety and trying to be able to access the same funds as private owners. And they've been campaigning because they've got a huge problem with it. And so that has hindered their ability to deliver. With the release of the 1 billion, the ability to access that, potentially, I know a lot of L12 have already gone back to their boards to reevaluate their development. So it could well unlock more properties. I would say there is a £6 billion need, but yeah, I think it has been really welcomed, the 1 billion.
Tom, I mean, as the probably the largest, well, the 100k units in management, you probably more likely to have higher rise stock.
Yes,
is this something that is going to be helpful, do you think?
Yeah, the announcement of equal access is extremely welcome, as are the other announcements in the CSR around consultation on rent convergence, for instance. Given the scale of the funding that we need to deliver those investigations and potential works on high-rise buildings, we need to assess the impact of how much grant we can get through that £1 billion fund to assist us in achieving those works that we need to deliver. We need to take it in the round, I think, in terms of that fund, plus any outcome of the rent convergence consultation, assess what capacity is created there, and then look at the programmes that can be supported through that, whether that's planned works or new development, obviously fire remediation being the top priority.
Talking of which, obviously the issue of a second staircase as a requirement in new developments has been posed to us previously as being a matter that has created some delays where there's been going through the planning system and then having to redesign buildings. Is that something that's impacted Peabody?
Yes, it did do. I think the sort of initial announcement of those requirements was certainly a time where we had to obviously assess which schemes fell into the transitional arrangements and which schemes had to come forward with or be replanned in effect. I would say that we've adapted our pipeline to sort of consider that. There are some schemes that are currently deferred, which will need to go back for planning to include a second staircase at a point in time where we've got the capacity to unlock those schemes.
And somebody mentioned the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, known to its friends as PIB, or known to some people as PIB, for goodness only knows why. What impact do you think, and I'll start with Tom and then see if anyone else wants to come in, do you think the changes to the planning system that are being introduced through the Planning and Infrastructure Bill are going to have? Do you think they're going to be helpful in the London context? I can see nods already.
Yeah, I think the nods say it already. I think yes, they will. I think we welcome the proposed changes. Yeah.
I was just going to add the changes will be immense. It will be great to get more resources into the planning teams, because most planning teams are really stretched. More importantly, when any change happens, by definition, there is a little bit of a delay because the change has to be adapted. So I suspect that there will be a little bit of a period of time where planners and and the GLA planners as well are having to adapt to those changes before they can then really motor and implement those and benefit those properly. But I think once they've got the head around all of the changes that are needed, I think it will definitely move things on much quicker.
Okay, thanks. And Tracy, you wanted to come in on that as well?
Yeah, just to say in terms of the what is planned, it's a breath of fresh air, but it's, for me, the concern would be the speed of that change. As Barbara said, the planning teams are really stretched. Where is that labour force going to come from? The skills, we're losing skills from the sector, so the ability to make those changes in the speed we need to deliver the programme would be a concern. But in terms of the actual plans, yeah, I think they're really positive.
And I'm going to come to you, Heather, now. I just wanted to quickly ask you a question. Obviously, you told us that you're a supported housing provider, and obviously we've also just explored the difficulty in supported, which is more to do with the revenue side rather than necessarily the capital side. What types of supported housing do you provide currently, and what are the limitations on revenue funding doing to your ability to provide it?
So we provide supported housing. It's commissioned. All of our supported housing is commissioned by the respective local authorities. So we have a large scheme in Camden for men who've experienced drug, alcohol, misuse, homelessness, obviously, maybe ex-offenders, a range of issues, mental health issues. We have a similar scheme in Islington as well. But it's outside London. We have two smaller schemes, which I won't talk about because they're not within the GLA remit. And so we have had those schemes for long before I arrived as CEO at Sapphire. And we have very good relationships with our local commissioners. But really, I would say I've been CEO here for 9 years, and we've had no increase in revenue support grant from our local authority partners. And we absolutely understand why. They just simply haven't got the money. But in an era of rising staff costs, rising resident needs, complexity of needs, all the issues around increased regulation, because we are a registered provider as well as being commissioned by a local authority. With that increasing costs and no increase in revenue funding, it is extremely difficult. And the committee will be aware that many providers, a lot of the larger providers, have actually moved out supported housing because the margins are too tight. My board and my organisation, we've been around for 50-odd years. We're very committed to social housing, but it is increasingly difficult to certainly grow it, and we've not had any new supported housing schemes in the time that I've been there. Our main aim at the moment strategically is to try and maintain the schemes that we've got. And if conditions are right in the future, i.e. if there is better support from local and central government for revenue funding, sustained revenue funding, then we would absolutely be open to looking at providing more supported housing provision.
So let me just get that clear. You've been there for 9 years and you just said no new provision for 9 years, and you are struggling to maintain schemes that are helping people who've got significant issues in their lives but could potentially get over them with that support from the staff, but the revenue funding to help people get over their drug or alcohol or other sort of life challenges hasn't gone up for many years because local authorities have been, you know, their budgets have been squeezed by 60, it's a reduction of 60%. So, of course, those people, if you had to shut those schemes, where do you think they'd end up? Back on the streets? Or
Potentially. Yeah, potentially they would. And I consider us to be fortunate because I know other partners. I'm vice chair of the G320 group, which is the opposite to the G12. We're the smaller group of associations operating in London. And I know many providers who've had their schemes decommissioned by local authorities because they simply don't have the funding.
Money.
So in a way, we're quite lucky that we've maintained our schemes and, you know, have maintained contracts with local authorities. But I stress it has been quite difficult to
decommissioned because of lack of cash, not because of lack of need.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would reiterate. Oh, sorry, Chair. I would reiterate that we have about 300 supported housing in our housing stock. We're trying to move to a different model because we don't manage support services anymore. But what we're finding is support providers want the accommodation, need the accommodation. Local authority funding, at the moment, the top-up funding for support, they're only guaranteeing funding for 6 months. And a lot of our support provider partners are not willing, and we wouldn't be, to be honest, to move residents in with that uncertainty of actually they might not have a home in 6 months or we'll be having to find them another home. So that is something we're struggling with.
God, that's a really good insight. We've got local authorities coming this afternoon, so I'll just for the next panel. So I'm thinking how we can put that question to them around that tension. I'm going to come to Assembly Member Boff and then Lord Bailey.
Thank you. You talked about what's recorded. Could you tell me, do you record the number of family-sized properties that you deliver? Perhaps Mr. Oliver?
Yeah, we will record the size of the properties, yeah.
And does that go for all of you? You record which times? Can I say whether or not the proportion has increased or decreased in the in terms of family homes?
Certainly for Square Roots, it's probably increased since our 21-23 programme. Certainly social rented tenures, we have a lot more larger family units in them, a lot more 2-3 bed units, 3-bed 4, 3-bed 5, 6. Within our 21-26 programme, the proportion of 3 beds is substantially higher than it was in the previous programme, and they're all documented on the GLA's OPS system. Yeah.
And what proportion of homes generally are you providing?
In our current programme, I think if you add 2 and 3 beds together, it's about 45% of the total, but 3 beds is about 30%. It's quite high.
30%.
Yeah.
And is that reflected for the other providers as well?
Yeah, at least 30% across my programme.
Ms. Thomas?
That's not the case for my provider. Most of the units in our programme are 1s or 2 beds.
For reasons that you've laid out. And Mr. Oliver?
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact figure, but I can check that. I would say it's probably a majority of 1 and 2 beds.
Yeah. Yes, and that's the case for London, I think. And what would help provide more family-sized properties? How would you be able, what would be the incentive for yourselves? With the exception of Ms. Thomas, I think.
I think for us it's a differential in rent that would make the difference. So when you're doing the modelling of the scheme, you obviously take the rent going forward into account. And there isn't a lot of difference between the rent, say, for a 2-bed or a 3-bed or a 4-bed. So when you look at the rental income stream going forward, that makes it difficult. I would potentially say as well, perhaps grant rates, if the grant rates, which are negotiable, if there was slightly more offered for larger size properties, that would also make a difference.
Okay. And to what extent has the government imposed rent cap affected your investment in housing? Mr. Oliver.
So I think the previously imposed rent cap has obviously affected our ability to invest as much as we would like. As I said earlier, the consultation on rent convergence will hopefully assist that. But fundamentally, when you're taking future rental income streams out of, or reducing them down out of the business, it does have a large effect on our ability to balance that investment between both our existing homes and our future pipeline.
Do you have a figure of how many you haven't built as a result of rent caps, how much you've pulled back?
I don't have a figure for that. I think there was some work done by the G15 for a select committee a couple of years ago that looked at the total amount of capacity that came out of the sector over a 30-year period. So I can reference that after the meeting. I don't know. I can't remember the figure right now.
Thank you very much. And what about the other providers? How have the rent caps affected yourselves?
It's not really directly affected Square Roots. We're quite a new provider in the sector, having only been established in 2021. So our assumption on rents going forward for 23, 24, 25 were relatively conservative and probably below what that inflation peak was in that year anyway. So didn't directly impact where we were or how we were modelling schemes at that time. But I suspect if you've got a 30-year plan and 100,000 units, it's a substantial figure that comes into play.
I think for us, the rent cap didn't affect us significantly. Going forwards, we were modelling CPI plus 1% anyway, but only for the next, 5 years. So that that certainty of a 10-year is really helpful, but not necessarily the CPI plus 1%, but actually the longevity is likely to affect us going forwards positively.
Thank you.
If I may say, I think the issue actually predates the rent cap in 2023. I think the issue of capacity actually goes back to the 2016 to 2020 period when associations had to cut rents by 1% a year up until 2020. Then the normal rent settlement was reinstated for a couple of years. Then we had the rent cap. So if you combine that period of cutting rents and then the rent cap in 23, it has taken out a significant amount of capacity from the overall sector. I don't want to quote a figure, but I know that the National Housing Federation has done some modelling on this. And I think the figure is probably in the low bill, 2 or 3 billion was taken out overall for all associations. Certainly for my association, some capacity has been taken out if we go back from 2017 to now, which is why, as colleagues said here, we welcome the government's consultation on rent convergence, because if that is brought in and can help us over time get back to where we might have been, then that will absolutely increase our ability to increase supply and indeed improve our existing homes.
Well, it's what rent caps do. Anyway, thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Lord Bailey, for your question.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to you all. I'm going to start with Tom and then come to Barbara. The start targets for the 21-26 programme was reduced again in May. To what extent do you think this reduced target is realistic?
So, speaking from our own sort of situation, obviously, we don't talk to the GLA around what others are achieving in their programmes, but we've started just around a third of our programme. So, as I said, we've got 1,000 home allocation in the programme. We started just under a third of it. And we have sites that could potentially come forward to deliver the remainder. I think clearly now where we are in terms of the timescales, we are within a year of the sort of that milestone point. So I think we'd be talking to GLA around sort of whether there's any flexibility around that to ensure that we can start all of the homes that we've allocated.
Hi there. For us, the one single factor, bearing in mind we don't have any scheme that is under 18 metres. Everything is over 18 metres. So for us, making sure that we get through all of the gateways in the BSR is critical, and any delay process in that will delay substantive start. So we have sites where we have started with enabling works, but obviously we can't start piling yet until we actually get those gateway approvals through. One of our projects, which is in the GLA programme for 21-26, the application for Gateway 2 was submitted in August 24 and still has yet to be determined. Wow. So that gives you some indication of the delay, and there is no way that we can start piling until we get that Gateway 2 approval process. I think wider, I mean, most of what Square Roots does is generally additionality. So we generally work on independent sites. We have a parent company that's a house builder that builds for us. We haven't been involved to date with any of their Section 106 opportunities. They've generally done those with their other partners, but I'm aware that there are quite a lot of Section 106 opportunities that are stalled because obviously in the 21-26 programme there is no grant available for Section 106 planning gain. In the previous programme that was more flexible. So I think there are some of those sites that people are not taking forward and have stalled, that if they have a large proportion of social rent in them, will still need some level of grant to move them forward and enable them to go forward. But I think London disproportionately has the problem of a large substantial amount of buildings that are over 18 metres.
Yeah, that's a London thing. We like a tall building for obvious reasons. Do you think the delay in the start of the programme, because obviously it commenced a bit late, do you think if it, I mean, it's an obvious question really, if it started on time, would more be delivered? I suppose that's, yeah, when, you know, it sounded much more contentious in my head. I'll come back to Tom, and then anybody else can chip in. Has a GLA supported you to meet your delivery targets?
Yes, yeah. I think unequivocally yes. I think the understanding on a site-by-site basis has been very good, and the time taken to understand the sort of constraints both across those sites, but also, as I talked about earlier, the sort of capacity constraints that we're facing as an organisation, as a sector. The reference to obviously high-rise buildings. Peabody do have a substantial amount of high-rise buildings which we do need to allocate capacity to remediate. And I think there is an understanding that draw on resources to ensure that we've got safe and sustainable existing homes has meant that we've had to work hard with the GLA to understand what we can deliver on a site-by-site basis through this programme. Okay.
I'm going to come to Heather, because just for a sort of specific... Have you faced any barriers, any challenges in working with the GLA? I ask you because you represent small associations.
The only barrier I would say was, which we've mentioned already, is really about sort of delayed in the announcement. So that, you know, the 21 to 26 programme, there was a delay in that, and as we've said, that has an impact. I think not just in terms of getting schemes started, but actually potentially increasing costs, because we have been in a period where inflation has been high. So just that delay of a few months in hearing what the grant allocation is going to be means when you go back to the contractor, their costs have gone up. So that's been the impact. But overall, I would say the GLA has been very encouraging to smaller providers, and we've worked really well with our team. As Tom has said, their understanding of the market conditions and under the programme, their ability to, if you like, flex a grant rate has been very helpful to us. So we've worked quite well with them, I think.
Okay. Is there anybody else comment on that? Largely,
Yes, certainly from a Square Roots point of view, we are a relatively new entrant into the market. So a new relationship with the GLA. We've only been an investment partner since 2022. And we are an investment partner, not a strategic partner. So we don't get an indicative bid allocation. Everything we do is under continuous market engagement process, which is everything is then looked at in detail on a scheme-by-scheme basis. And the team that we work with are very good at getting into the detail of those schemes pretty quickly and helping us determine the additional information they need, helping us with relationships with local authorities if we need help with relationships with local authorities as well. So they've been incredibly encouraging and done sort of everything within their power really to influence and help us with the process.
Okay, thank you. And for my final question, I'm going to start with you again, Tom, because you're one end of the book stand as well, and we'll go across the panel. What do you predict will be the key challenges to meeting the 21-26 programme completions target by March 2030? What would you like the GLA to do to support you to meet this target?
I think it's probably twofold from our perspective. So it's an internal piece around unlocking that capacity to deliver homes. And I think some of the government announcements, will, as we talked about earlier, will hopefully ensure that happens, so we can direct investment to new starts. That clearly has to happen quickly to enable us to allocate funding to start new homes. And then, as Barbara's mentioned, I think the process of going through the building safety regulator for high-rise buildings needs to be robust, but also needs to recognise the sort of speed that is required to ensure that we can achieve starts. I think fundamentally, as I said, there is now a huge sort of pressure on the timings of this programme, and I think that there probably does need to be a conversation around whether the numbers are achievable in the sort of timescales of March 2026.
Tracy?
Yes, I think it's achievable. I think probably the biggest thing is, or one of the biggest things for us, is planning. One of the other things is obviously contractor risk. So as a small organisation who are developing with small and medium BMA contractors, there is a high risk to them going into insolvency than there will be with some of the larger companies. So in terms of the risk of our development, I think that is another risk that we face as a small organisation. Some of the developments we have are maybe 20 homes, and that's not going to be attractive to any large contractor. So we do have to kind of take a punt, if you like, on the smaller contractors, and you like to think you'll work with those that you've worked with before and know the areas that we're working in, because working in Croydon or certainly the London boroughs can be quite different to other areas like Kent or...
Yeah, I see your point. Is Barbara?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think under the current 21-26 programme, I think most of that programme is pretty much allocated now, but not necessarily started. So it's with providers that may or may not be held up. I guess my worry is how much of that will come back at the last minute, and then for us, because we don't have our own land with our own units on at the moment, where we would just be able to find a new scheme and drop it into the programme at the last minute, or commit to something. When we commit to a new project, we're buying land on the open market. So having the understanding of what grant is still left in the 21-26 pot, if there is anything left, or if there's anything coming back that needs to be spent and needs to be built by 2030, would be really helpful. And I think that's a challenge for the GLA, because they can't go to providers and just take the money back if it's not delivered at the moment, because everybody's having challenges to deliver completions for all the reasons that we've spoken about today. So there is that point of which, at what point do providers say, we can't deliver this scheme now, we're going to give those funds back, so that somebody else could try and use that funding and it not go to waste, so to speak, to be able to deliver something during the end of this 21-26 programme, because we've still got until March 2030 to deliver. We've still got a good, 4 or 5 years left. That still means we could, from a Square Roots point of view, look at 2 or 3 new schemes now that are consented that we could have on site next year, albeit making sure we got through the gateways and there was an allocation commitment to those for us to be able to move forward.
Because that's been a problem in the past, because in the past the GLA and MA had to give money back to the government that they weren't able to allocate. Heather, you don't have to add anything, Heather, but if you do want to.
I just wanted to add, if I may, ready to echo what Tracy said, but just say one particular issue we have under the new programme is that some of our projects were designed under the 16 to 23 programme, and obviously the 21 to 26 programme had additional or different requirements, so we had to go back and get planning amended, and we're certainly awaiting that planning amendment decision for some of our schemes, and that is an issue. We've talked about delays in planning. Hopefully that will come through quickly, but that is an issue. The other issue, as Tracy said, is a smaller provider, or even smaller than CCHA, is we are working with smaller builders, because that makes sense for us to do that. And, the contracting section is still under pressure, and so there is a risk, hopefully it won't happen, but there is a risk with smaller contractors that, costs will overrun them, and potentially, we have issues of contractor insolvency. It hasn't happened on our programme so far. We monitor it closely, but we have to be realistic. That is an issue, and we know it has happened. Or contractors simply withdrawing, saying that they can't complete the job is a risk. Having said that, I do believe, I remain confident that we can meet the 2030 deadline for this programme. But there are some challenges along the way in doing so.
Okay,
I was
Tracy?
just going to add, that we have actually handed grant back. So we've worked really well with our GLA liaison team and been very open with them about realistically what schemes we've got in. So at the beginning of the when we had our grant allocated, it was 12.5 million in July 23. We have named schemes now for 7.5 million and handed 5 million of that back, so other providers can then use that money. But it doesn't then block us from going the CME route, and we're certainly encouraged to do that. But it means exactly what you were saying, Barbara, is that other providers, if they have schemes that are possibly more advanced than ours, can use that allocation.
Thank you. Chair, I probably should have said that I am the chairman of Friday Ventures, and we work to provide social housing and work with registered landlords as well. So I probably should declare that interest at the beginning. Excuse me. Back to you.
Thank you. Going across to Assemblymember Baker. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, panel. So I've got a couple of questions on subjects that we've at some points touched on a bit. So bear in mind, you may have already answered some of it, but I'd like to ask the questions directly. And the first question is about the impact of negotiated grant rates. And so what's been the impact of being able to negotiate those grant rates under the Affordable Homes Programme 21-26? Has that had an impact on your delivery? I want to chip in.
So as I said at the start, I think the ability to sort of get that certainty of an overall programme at the start is really beneficial, and I think it's definitely a better approach than doing the tariff rates. One thing that perhaps it doesn't recognise is that as you move through a programme, obviously build cost inflation will move over that period, and therefore it doesn't necessarily keep up with that recognition of that. So I think in the new programme, however long we set out those intermediate sort of milestones, I guess, whether it's a 10-year or a 5-year programme, I think there needs to be some recognition of the inflationary pressures over that time period.
So Tom's sort of referred to the fact that Peabody are a strategic investment partner rather than just an investment partner. And obviously there's a difference in how grant is allocated on that basis. Yeah. So for somebody like Square Roots that is trying to build a very substantive pipeline across London and not being a strategic partner, that's probably more problematic than negotiated grant and the process of negotiated grant, because what we don't get is here's an allocation for the next 4 years up front to give us a level of certainty, even if that level of certainty needs to move slightly over that 4-year period. That would then enable, when you're going out and buying land in the market, to have that certainty behind you, to know that you can get a deal across the line, buy the land and move on and progress and get through planning. Every single project we do, because we're doing it as an investment partner and the strategic partner route isn't open anymore for anybody to apply for, every single scheme is a continuous market engagement scheme. Yeah. So the minute we engage with a landowner, we engage with the GLA, the landowner generally is always by definition going to move quicker than the GLA, because landowners will want to move quickly, want a decision quickly, want an offer quickly. Yeah. So the two, that's probably a harder aspect for me. If I can work with landowners, or specifically if it's local authorities with land, it's a lot easier, because obviously they're a lot more patient in the process, and they've got greater expectations and reasons to work with us to do more affordable homes. So but if it's a private landowner, then obviously it's a lot difficult to manage that process and to then do the CME and then the negotiated grant process. Yeah. But the negotiated grant is definitely welcomed. The higher grant rates are definitely needed, especially if you're doing social rent, and a lot more of social rent. And picking up on Tom's point, especially on the basis that you've got continuing build cost inflation that doesn't show any signs of slowing down at the moment.
Thanks. Tracy, Heather, anything to add?
No, I would echo
you need to, don't worry.
Sorry, I would echo what Tom and Barbara said. I think on the negotiated grant rates under the current programme have worked far better for us.
Yeah,
I agree. That's
fine. Could I just add that
you can,
although it is an indicative allocation at the start, you have to put through individual schemes for assessment. Yeah. And therefore, I think one of the things that could be improved in future is the AVA process, the viability assessment that it happens on some schemes around whether we need grant for under 20% of the homes on a site. So that particularly has been a bit of a process that I think could probably be improved in future.
Fantastic. We will come back to asking what could be improved, so thank you. The next question is again about 21-26. Obviously, that the GLA introduced compliance conditions in building safety, design, sustainability. We've talked about some aspects of that, but overall, what's been your experience of implementing these standards, and do you feel that these measures have improved the quality of the homes delivered?
Definitely improve the quality, and I think welcomed. None of those standards were things that, as a reputable organisation, that we all wouldn't want to do as a registered provider. So there wasn't anything there where we would be pushing back, thinking, well, that's actually compliance for the sake of it. These were all really, really good standards, relatively easy to implement. Obviously, picking up on some of Heather's points earlier on, at the point of which you implemented them, because old programme, new programme, depending on how long you had a scheme moving forward for. The GLA don't really do waivers anymore. Not that you would want a waiver on building safety by no stretch of the imagination, but if you do have a non-compliant area, it's very difficult. They don't like to use the word waiver, but they will look at how they can help you if you have a non-compliant component.
Thank you. Tracy?
I think in terms of the standards, I think that they have been welcomed. I would say for smaller providers, smaller than myself, some of the requirements small providers have struggled with to get their heads around. So I would say in the future, possibly greater support.
Yeah. Thanks. That's helpful, yes. Tom?
I'd agree with what's been said. I think again, as you sort of transition schemes from individual points in time to when they actually reach a programme, it's sometimes a bit difficult to sort of retrofit different standards back onto those schemes. But I think I'd agree with what Barbara said. It's all been very necessary. I think it would be welcome if there's always an ambition to align standards that are required through the planning process with funding arrangements, if possible, but where you're using funding to sort of try and push on a standard, then it's kind of understandable that you will add more, but understanding the impact on that in terms of scheme viability is important as well. So.
Right, thank you. what else could the GLA do to improve the quality of homes delivered under the Affordable Homes Programme? I think, Tracy, you've mentioned something in terms of support for the smallest providers. Is there anything else specific that you could think could be done?
So we have delivered London Living Rent.
Yes.
We found it to be a really, really positive response, and London Living Rent homes for us have gone really quickly. We equally struggled when the requirement was that residents had to purchase them after 10 years. Yeah. And the management side of that was always going to be a struggle, if I'm honest. So whilst we welcomed the fact that actually that condition had been waived, that did affect the financial viability of the schemes. So obviously, in our financial assessments, it was, we then allowed 20% first tranche, if you like, in 10 years were in the appraisal that you then couldn't guarantee. So it made it adverse. So we started off building London Living Rent, and the last part of the programme, we've predominantly been social rent and shared ownership. Yeah. So I guess there's something around grant rates to reflect that would be helpful.
Thanks. Is there anything else on the quality of homes that the GLA could do that anyone wants to comment on?
I think that the GLA are launching a post-evaluation process, which fundamentally will be great. I'm not quite sure from a resource point of view as an organisation how we're going to resource it in terms of the surveys and how many surveys we impose on our customers. But I think the feedback from that will be the ultimate, because that's really hearing it from our customers as to, you know, what's gone well for them, what's worked well in their home, and how have they enjoyed living in those homes. And I think that's really the test, to be able to then determine whether any of those design elements need to change or whether standards need to change at all. But I'd like to think that we produce generally a very good standard product, but it would be useful to see the results of those when they come through.
Thank you. Thanks. And again, we're mixing all the questions up, so we've covered some of this already. No, this is good. It means it's flowing well. But what has worked well in the design and administration of the AHP 21-26 and what hasn't? Again, you've given some examples, so you only need to say new ones. Is there anything else you haven't mentioned?
I think in the administration of the process, unless you've ever used the GLA's OPS system, portal, you won't realise how painful that can be at times. So if you've got a relatively small scheme, it's pretty straightforward. But if, like us, you're trying to load a scheme in of 338 units and every single different unit type individually has to go onto the system, it's quite an administrative tall order. So we have spoken to them to find out if there's a way of being able to export, import Excel type data into the system to make that quicker and speedier. Because otherwise we literally have members of our team, and we're a relatively small team as a young organisation, who are literally there for hours, because when you have a compliance audit, you can't just have the number of ones and the number of twos, the numbers of threes, and what your average rent is. You have to have every single unit type, every single rent, every single service charge against every single plot. And when you've got a large scheme, that's actually quite traumatic for the team.
But obviously that is information you have, but it's literally making it easier to get that.
to make the system more user-friendly, I would say. Yeah.
Always. Tom?
As I said, I think the AVA process, the additional viability assessment, has been a process that could be refined, I'd say, in future. And I think there's just the consideration of whether actually, if you are a registered provider delivering a Section 106 within a wider mixed-use scheme, whether the funding could be extended to all of those homes rather than having to not fund the first 20%. So I think that piece has been a bit of an additional barrier to sort of ease of programme delivery, I'd say.
Thank you.
For us as a smaller provider, I mean, what's worked well is the flexibility we've talked about. I think the payment milestones work well for us. One thing I would say is, as a smaller provider, cash flow is important for us. So I think if some consideration could be given to, because currently I think we get payment at golden brick and at completion under the current programme, it would work better for us in terms of cash flow if we got payment at start on site, golden brick and at completion, so I'm split into three. However, once you submit a grant claim, you've got everything required to submit it, the process is very quick and you receive the claim quite quickly. Fortunately for me, I don't sit and use the OPS system, my development director does, but I echo what Barbara said from what he has said, that it can be, it can be a bit laborious using it, so any way that it could be simplified would be helpful.
Thank you. Tracy, do you have anything to add to?
Not really.
No, that's fine.
I would say that what I've found more positive this programme than last programme is my liaison with my GLA team has been more regular. And that's really helpful. So they're super accessible outside of regular meetings, but we do have regular meetings every month, 2 months, and they're kept to religiously, and that is useful.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think we've probably covered this, but is there anything specifically that the GLA could do differently? Obviously, a lot of you talked about, is there anything specifically the GLA could do differently to improve the affordable housing delivery in London?
The only thing for me would be some of the stumbling blocks are all about timing. So get the contracts done early. If you're going to change something within that contract, that is fine, or change something within the requirements. Absolutely understand that things do change, but try and give us as much notice as possible. Because even, small, big, we've all got the same demands on our time, limited resources to actually respond to those changes.
Thank you. And finally, of my questions, so wish list time, you've already started the wish list, but what would you like to see in the design of the next Affordable Homes programme? Now's your chance, if anything you haven't said.
We've only got 15 minutes left.
I think there needs to be a distinct sort of recognition of the importance of estate regeneration in the new programme. So if we look back, a significant amount of our new homes over the last couple of programmes have been through estate regeneration projects. And I think if the new programme can recognise the complexities of those projects, we'll be able to deliver both new homes but improved homes for existing residents as well.
Okay, thanks. Anything else you haven't mentioned?
A couple of things. I think there needs to be some recognition within planning gain affordable housing that is not always viable, and the expectation that the cross-subsidy comes from both the landowner and the developer is not always possible if there is a large proportion of social rent in there. If you haven't got a shared ownership blend to try and almost cross-subsidise your rented tenure, that makes that quite difficult. So I think something in the programme that recognises that. I know in the 21-26 we had the accelerated funding route, which Tom kind of picked up on, where it gave an element of funding to a bit of that if you had some additionality. But there are a lot of sites out there without additionality but still providing some really good quality homes that are probably stalled. Not necessarily sitting in my pipeline, because most of mine are sites that are 100% affordable with additionality anyway. I think having a really good blend of rented tenures, so I appreciate social rent is the key focus, and across London in some very low income areas that's really important, but there is a selection of people across London that need really good quality rented homes and are not even captured on council waiting lists at the moment in terms of intermediate rent or intermediate key worker, which I know the GLA are looking at and had a consultation on. I think that's going to be really important in the new programme, and making sure you've got a blend of different kinds of rent so that you've got a really sustainable development with different income thresholds and levels. There are issues with income thresholds generally in the NPPF which haven't been changed for many years, not necessarily within the GLA's gift to change, but an income level at 67,000 on rented and 90,000 for shared ownership that's not moved with inflation. We have quite a bit of shared ownership stock where 2 firefighters who are reasonably well qualified, 5-6 years into their career as a couple, both earning maybe 55, 60,000, just literally go over that joint limit of 90k, still can't afford to buy, struggle to rent in London, and we have to turn them down. So I think there are some elements, and I appreciate there is a, it's that point, isn't it, that you're at 90,000 and you go to 100 or 110, and it just feels like surely that you shouldn't have to have that cap for somebody and still call it affordable housing. But with the values in London that we have, we generally have people that are hitting an income level of 110, 120,000 as a household, as a joint income, and are struggling in private rented, still can't afford to buy, and shared ownership or some form of first-time home ownership is still really important to them, and we have to turn them away, and it's pretty devastating when we have to do that. So some kind of review, whoever needs to do that on those income caps, would be really, really helpful.
Thank you. Tracy, did you have anything?
Just some sort of clear funding around specialist programmes. So supported housing, yes, but we work with, or we're starting to work with cooperatives. We're a local community housing association, pride ourselves in it. So, but a cooperative will need, their needs will be slightly different. They'll need community space, whereas the grant under the 21-26 that we're working on a scheme at the moment, and the grant recognises just the additional homes rather than actually the whole scheme, which is a community hub, if you like. So something around specialist programmes like that would be helpful.
Thank you. Heather, did you have anything to add?
I would echo that. We're actually working on a similar scheme. It's not the same scheme with the CLT, and we haven't got an allocation yet. We will hopefully be bringing it forward, but one of the issues is there is a community space in there, and that won't be funded if it was under the current programme. So again, some flexibility on that. I would say with nice supported housing, I know the issue is mainly revenue, but if there could be something which could help in terms of capital and linking it to revenue, that would be really useful under the programme. But just to really say repeat everything we said, flexibility on grant rates, which we've had in the current programme. For smaller providers, some flexibility about how that grant is paid would be really important. And I think above all, as Tracy and others have said, is really make an announcement and decisions as soon as you can, because then we can start to get things lined up.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. I know we might go over by 5 minutes. Is that acceptable to everyone? Thanks. We've just got a few more questions. This has been really, really brilliant. I'm going to hand over to Assemblymember Boff for the next one.
When you say a few, I've probably got a few myself in addition. The next affordable housing programme is a 10-year programme. How can we ensure that the delivery is not pushed to the end of that programme, as has been the case in the previous 2 programmes? Who would like to answer that?
You could give some incentives for some early starts, potentially, to make sure that you've got some starts very quickly on in the first couple of years of that programme. What that could be anything between what the grant rate looks like, whether the grant is community-based, housing-based, or if you want to bring some specialist projects in to encourage people to bring those forward quicker. But I would definitely look at some kind of incentive to try and get people in and get their starts in early. Obviously, what you don't want is everything back-ended and then ending up with lots of money going back because people don't deliver. Encouraging organisations to build and have, if they can, a good pipeline of schemes. And you're probably it's difficult in London to do things that are outside of BSR, because those things that are consented and outside of BSR, that you can start quickly, you can move quickly, and you can build out pretty quick. But trying to encourage, I guess, the grant across a various collection of different schemes and trying to help with that would be useful, just to push those starts into the early part of the programme.
Any other ideas, or does that all sound, Mr. Oliver?
I think again, I go back to the point around recognising the capacity constraints of the sector. So obviously, both GLA and ourselves and government need to work together to ensure that we create that capacity to ensure that we can deliver both improvements on our existing homes and then do new development. So if we want delivery early in the next programme, we will need to sort out that capacity constraint to move on to unlocking new development. I think what I would say is that we do have sites that are deferred at the moment and ready to go. So in a sense, we're in a good position. We don't need to go out into the land market to find new opportunities. It's just about ensuring that the capacity is there to unlock the ones that we do have.
Thank you. We've also heard that there have been difficulties finding affordable housing partners to purchase Section 106 affordable homes. Is this something you've had experience with, Mr. Oliver? Oh, Ms. Cullen.
So my biggest beef, I suppose, with Section 106 is they engage us too late. So developers will come to us when they've got a practically delivered scheme. And there are a number around Croydon, actually, where developers have gone into receivership. Those specs are completely inappropriate for social housing. So we've had to say no to a lot of sites that actually, location-wise, numbers-wise, really work for us. But when we've gone in, I mean, purely down to materials, you know, they've got marble floors and work surface and the space standards aren't to what we would expect for our residents. So I am not against Section 106 at all, but I get in there early. So one that I'm delivering at the moment is a Section 106 where we've taken over the whole block, but we're actually in there building with the developer. And so any additionality that we need, changes to the spec, improvements to the spec from what they want, we have a choice. Whereas actually when we're provided with a finished product, invariably it isn't suitable for, or isn't the type of home that I would want to provide for my residents.
Thank you.
Yes,
Mr.
Just to add to that, I think the product is an important factor, but also the complexity of the management arrangements on some of those schemes when we think about responsibility against the sort of Building Safety Act, whether you're the principal accountable person, AP, etc. So sometimes those Section 106 opportunities are quite complex in the management further down the line, so we're really wary of what we're getting into in that sense, as well as the sort of spec of the product.
I'm going to disagree slightly with my colleagues here, because we have taken up 3 Section 106 opportunities.
We do
in the
actually
last 3
like
years.
it when the panel disagrees, actually. It's proper
we
debate.
took up 1 block in Camden with Section 106, which was a mixture of assured tenancies, intermediate rent and shared ownership. The developer did go bust in the end, but you know we acquired the scheme. We took another one where it was just 1 flat, a shared ownership flat in Camden within a private block, but we purchased that, and we've got another one which is on its way in near Mornington Crescent. Again, great locations. It's a 3-bedroom ground floor accessible flat, again within a private development. So we're absolutely open to it. In fact, and my view is, and we can't get grant on Section 106s, but I really do think that's something that GLA should think about if we want to increase the supply of affordable housing. And I think we're potentially missing a trick because, you know, the likes probably of Peabody and other larger associations are not going to be interested in 1 or 2, you know, beds in a broader development. But a small association like myself will be. And we need to, you know, perhaps we should be approached a bit more.
Yeah, the ones I have heard of have been rather large amounts of properties that they can't find managers for, not the small ones. So perhaps that's a very useful contribution. Perhaps they should be going to some of the smaller providers if they're amenable. I'll move on quickly. Sorry, Chair, for taking so long. The AHP for 2021-26 implements a number of equality, diversity and inclusion measures. What were you not doing beforehand? Who were you not including beforehand that you are including now as a result of that requirement?
Not sure the requirement is forcing us to include people we didn't include before. I think it's what it's doing is asking us to evidence who we're including and how we're doing it. So it's a compliance issue. It requires us to pull some data together. A lot of the data we're pulling together as an organisation, we pull together anyway. Some of it is, you know, a little bit more than that we need to do. So it's more about having the resources in your team, if you're a small organisation, to actually gather all the information. But it's not necessarily we're not doing it. It just means we need to evidence what we are doing and how we're doing it.
And has the GLA been supportive in that?
Very supportive, yes, they have.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we're coming on to the final question, but there's a couple of others that want to come in on this, and it is a big one. But do you think London's allocation of the 11.7 billion of the next Affordable Homes Programme will go far enough to addressing the housing shortage and being able to provide the homes that we need? Heather, I might start with you, just as, and then some others might come in with some follow-ups.
I don't know. I was slightly concerned when I heard that the allocation, I think, had been reduced. So why worry? I mean, you know, you're the Housing Committee. There's huge housing need. And, you know, one of the things we haven't talked about here, and I know you've got the local authorities coming in, is, you know, there is actually a housing emergency. We've got so many children and people living in temporary accommodation. And I worry that there is not enough of a sense of urgency about us altogether trying to do something about that in London. And part of that is making sure, I suppose, that we get appropriate funding to really respond to that. So, yeah, I do worry slightly about that. Having said that, criticism could come back to us in that, you know, you're not delivering as fast as you should do. You're not, you know, taking up the full allocation. Hopefully we've explained this morning what the barriers and challenges are to that. It's not that we don't want to, it's just that there are significant barriers and challenges. So, yeah, I do have a slight worry that the allocation perhaps doesn't reflect the need that we have in London.
It's a great response. I echo lots of that sentiment. Barbara, did you want to come in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, picking up on that statistically wise, I mean, we've got more than 300,000 households on the waiting list for London. That's, you know, just over 25% of the entire waiting list for England. It's pretty substantial. In addition to that, the costs of building in London are substantially more than building anywhere else. So I can see from a government point of view, would be very easy to distribute the funds into out of London areas or outer city areas as well, because other cities are quite challenging to deliver homes in, where the grant would go further and you'd get more affordable homes. That doesn't take away the acute housing crisis that we've got in London and the need, and also the pressures on London councils in relation to those temporary accommodation budgets. I think it was quoted about £4 million a day or something. In terms of costs, and that's only going to get bigger. That's not going away. So I think the 30% of the 39 billion is not quite enough, but at the moment I'll take whatever's available and I'll spend it as quickly as I can. So, but I think it does need to be more, but maybe there's a negotiation later on in the programme duration, as it's such a long period for 10 years.
Thank you.
Same sentiment really. I don't think it's enough. I think we have the biggest housing crisis in London. We have the biggest issues around building safety. And so I think the allocation should have reflected that. You are likely to get more homes in wider boroughs, but actually the need is in London. So I would be concerned that we aren't going to be able to deliver what we need with that.
Thanks. And Tom, and just to fold in a follow-up, if you could reflect on maybe the 60% social rent target, and if you think that's people,
So I think the first question around is it enough? I think we have to recognise that grant is a part of the delivery funding mix, I suppose. So if it's sort of 30 to 40% of the cost of a home, RPs will have to borrow the remainder of that money to deliver the sites. So I think as well as sort of considering whether that is enough, and I'm sure we'll see over the course of the programme, I think it's a good start to as a start point for, and the certainty over a 10-year period is good. But I think we have to recognise the sort of whole housing ecosystem of ensuring that planning's working well, ensuring that RPs have got capacity to deliver new build as well as the access to grant. I think the 60% figure is a slight challenge, but I think we're probably there or thereabouts on our programme overall. As long as it's taken as a programme approach to that figure rather than individual site approach, we wouldn't have too much of a problem with that.
That's really helpful. I'm going to go to Assembly Member Baker and then Lord Bailey. No, great. Lord Bailey.
Thank you. I think your response there, Tom, was spot on about a programme approach. How much should the Mayor ask for then? The Mayor is famous for asking the previous government for 4.2 billion every single year. He's gone very silent on that now. But how much would you ask for? And don't let the Chancellor's pains bother you. Just ask for how much you think you need. Let me start with Barbara.
For me, I think it should be 50% of the programme, personally, because of the increased costs and because of the much higher demand. So I would say 50% of that programme, of that 39 billion, should be centred around London. But I'm an organisation that solely works in London, so maybe I should declare that interest to begin with.
We are solely focused on London here.
I'm solely focused on London. So there are other organisations here that are obviously outside of London as well, and therefore will have access to funding from the wider Homes England pot elsewhere.
Okay, is 50% enough, or is someone going to bid me higher?
I wouldn't bid either way, but I think the point I would make is that we have got a specific issue with high-rise remediation in London, so we need to look at the allocation of those resources to support that unlocking of capacity for RPs. So, as I say, it's all about. I think we need to look at the available capacity, funding in the round, so making sure that we've got availability to ensure that our existing homes are safe and secure, as well as the new homes.
So that's a point you'd like us to make as a committee to the Mayor, because our ultimate goal is to support the Mayor to ask the government for more. It's relevant which government it is, and I think that's a strong point that we would add as a recommendation as to why we should get more. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Can I just think it would be interesting to know how they came to that figure, because for me, I wouldn't put a number on it, but it needs to be proportionate, and it absolutely needs to be proportionate on need. So how they came to that allocation would be interesting, whether they've based it on needs or, God forbid, plucked it out of the air, which I'm sure they haven't.
I sit in House of Lords. I've asked that question. Okay. I've had a number of responses, but in the government's defence, need in political world can be interpreted many different ways. Imagine you're in Plymouth, our need in London is no bigger than your need in Plymouth, and the government would have had to take that into account. So I do have some sympathy for how they arrived at need. I do believe we all need more money to do it.
We'll leave that one there. Thank you to everyone for contributing. We've come to the end, and thank you for staying with us slightly longer. You've given us a real insight into how this has been working and not working, and lots of ways that this can be improved for the next programme. There might be some bits that we'll follow up on. I'm especially interested in some of the comments around London living rent and viability, so we might come back with some additional questions, if that's okay. Tom, sorry. I
just wanted to add a correction to something I said earlier to Leonie about the way that we put our adaptable units on the system. So we do put them on. We don't put any other information apart from the numbers on the system.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. So, yeah, thank you so much. And we might come up with some other questions, but just really appreciate your time and everything you're doing to deliver. Thank you. That's so... Welcome back to today's Housing Committee, where we're discussing the Mayor's affordable housing delivery. I'd like to welcome our second panel. So we've got Alice Lester, MBE, Director of Regeneration, Growth and Employment at Brent Council, and Osama Shoush from Housing Strategic Lead from Southwark Council. So welcome. We're really excited to have you here and get your insights. We've got a range of questions and aware that we need to finish at 12:40, so I'll make sure I manage it to that time. But we might come back to you with some more questions afterwards if we don't cover everything. So the first question's from me. So what has been your experience of working with the GLA and delivering homes under the Affordable Homes Programme 2021 to 26? Someone, do you want to start? Great.
Yeah, very positive. We work really closely with the GLA. We meet every fortnight. We have them down to our sites to talk through some of the more complicated developments we work on, and we, discuss very closely with them some of the complexities and challenges of delivery. But it is fair to say that...
Sorry, Osama, I wonder if could you get a bit closer to the microphone?
Of course, sorry.
The microphone closer to you.
Yeah. Either way.
But yeah, fair to say that this period has been very, very difficult. We've had massive inflation in build prices, borrowing costs have increased, and the changes in building safety regulations have massively increased the cost of what we build on top of that too. So I think a lot of the aspirations we had to deliver in 2021 when the programme started, we've had to really take a hard look at and work out what we can what we have to change to make sure that we can still deliver. And it's been very difficult. We've been supported by the GLA through a lot of those difficult discussions, but it has meant that a lot of the stuff that I would have hoped we would have started on site already now is still to start on site and will start at the end of this programme.
Thanks. That's really insightful. We've got more questions to follow up on lots of what you just said there. Alice.
Hi, thank you. Can I just correct my job title? It's an old one. I'm now Corporate Director for Neighbourhoods and Regeneration. So I got promoted since that last time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Apologies about that, yeah.
So I would say, yeah, really well. We interact with the GLA at different levels. So there are the sort of the operational development management levels about site specifics, as was just mentioned. Then I have sort of more strategic higher level catch-ups about on a quarterly basis. And we also have political meetings as well between the leader and the lead member and Tom Crockley. I think they're every quarter as well. So we do engage well on sort of quite a few different levels. I've always sort of felt that that we all want the same thing. We all want to get these houses delivered. So everybody's sort of working with their own environment to sort of try and make that happen. And sometimes it's not aligned, but mostly, everybody wants to get this done. And I've always found that the GLA, whilst they hold us quite rightly to account, we have to explain our delivery milestones and challenges and financial issues, etc. I've always found the GLA staff members that I've engaged with very willing to try and help and be flexible where they can. So, yeah, very positive with shared goals.
Great. And could you just give a flavour of the scale of some of the delivery that you've done under the Affordable Homes Programme?
Yeah, I mean, I don't... Brent has historically delivered a lot of homes. I don't have a list of which precise sites are in part of which programme, but we generally have managed to secure quite considerable grant from the GLA. So we have a council-wide commitment for 5,000 affordable homes to be delivered by 2028. That is council's own delivery and the private sector and registered provider delivery. But of those 5,000, our commitment is 1,700 council direct delivery homes, and we are achieving that. So as of the turn of the financial year 25-26, we'd delivered ourselves 758, and we have another 1,000 due to complete before March 28. We're taking about 1,000 handovers this year where we've done acquisitions from the private sector. So we are doing quite well at delivery. However, reflecting on some of the challenges which have already been made in the opening remarks and in the previous session, our pipeline has effectively dried up now. Because of the viability challenges, we aren't starting new ones on site at the moment. So we're finishing off ones that are on site and taking the acquisitions. But the pipeline, I'm afraid, is looking pretty bleak at the moment.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and from Southwark's perspective, so in total we've had 2,872 homes funded by the GLA, The vast majority of those will have been council homes, and most of that was funded through the Building Council Homes for London programme. Of that 2,872, we've completed 1,420 so far. Most of the others are sort of fairly close to completion at the moment. We do have homes funded under the current 21 to 26 programme, but as I've said, a lot of those we are expecting to start at the end of this current programme, so haven't started on site yet.
Thank you. Got some follow-up questions from Assemblymember Cooper.
Well, sort of. The HRA, Housing Revenue Account, how have financial pressures on your HRA affected your ability to build affordable homes in your borough? I'll start with Osama and then come to Alice.
Yeah, there's been lots of different pressures on the HRA. Obviously, all of our costs related to housing, maintenance, management, and our new build programme all are funded effectively from the same pot. A massive factor has been the increase in borrowing costs. So a lot of our council house programme is funded through borrowing. When the cost of borrowing increase, that removes our headroom to borrow more. It means we can build less. Additional pressures related to fire safety mean that there's more money that we rightfully need to spend on making sure that our homes are safe and secure for people to live in, and that is money that that's an additional pressure on the HRA that needs to be met. The rent increases capped to inflation, below inflation, was good for our residents. It was the right thing to do, but again, the costs of delivering those services still do increase by inflation, so that is an additional pressure we've had to deal with. Yeah, it has had an impact, and it remains quite pressured.
Alice, do you want to add to any of those pressures?
Yes, I mean, tremendous pressures on the HRA, and partly that is, some of the statutory regulatory requirements. So the fire safety works and energy efficiency upgrades are all, eating into the HRA as well as all the maintenance costs associated with the ageing housing stock. The ongoing management and maintenance costs, and obviously we have, for any new developments that we do or the acquisitions, we have to build in the costs on the HRA to continue to do that and provide the service.
Thanks. I don't think I'm going to ask you about starts and completions because we've just covered that. Do you feel that you've managed to overcome the challenges of building in London? You were saying your pipeline has dried up, really, so possibly the answer to that is no.
Yeah, it's the financial pressures. We just haven't been able to make the viability for schemes stack up, even with the grant. It just doesn't come close to enabling us to make these viable, and a lot of that is related to the cost of borrowing. So if we were able to access cheaper borrowing at lower interest rates, then that would make a difference. We're also looking at when the finance team do the sums. They look at a 40-year payback, which they think is more realistic. Previously, it was sort of 55 years, but the finance directive decided that was wasn't really working and wasn't presenting an accurate picture. So they've changed that to a 40-year payback. We've looked at sort of changing the tenures, including sort of a mixed tenure, so sort of private sale for the cross subsidy, but which we are still looking at, actually, but on some of the sites so far it hasn't made it viable.
Jamie and Southwark?
Overcome, I think, implies that we've solved the problem, and no. I think we are looking at lots of different partial solutions to help, and we've changed how we do things. So the vast majority of our programme to date has been through direct delivery, where essentially we have appointed the builders to build for us, and we've spent all the money, paid the money to do it. Whereas going forward, we just do not have the ability to borrow that much money to cash flow schemes that way. So we've had to adapt to work in more development partnerships, where we are forming a partnership around our land, where the developer then would put in the finance to fund that building work, where we still get council homes back from it. So essentially we've had to look at different ways of delivering homes. We've always tried to do an element of cross subsidy, but it is really difficult if you want to sell private homes to make enough money to build council homes, partly because the cost of building flats in London is really high, and that means you have to then sell them for even higher to both make the money back to cover the cost of building those private flats, but also to get additional income in to build your social houses.
Yes, I think we can all see that there's going to be some difficulties going forward. On a slightly different area, though, do you record the accessibility standards of the homes that are being produced, and do you meet all the percentages for adaptable and adapted and fully accessible?
Yes, we record that on APS and we deliver 10% fully adapted homes in the homes we build.
Same?
Ditto.
Okay. And what about particular challenges delivering some types and tenures of housing? You just were talking about the difficulty of producing social rented and across subsidising it. Is there any other category of housing that you're having particular difficulty with? We heard earlier on today that supported housing is really difficult at the moment, more because of the revenue side. But is there anything else that you would draw our attention to specifically that's difficult? I'll start with Osama.
The main focus of our housing delivery programme is council homes for social rent. And that's difficult because of, the grant rates cover 30 to 40% of it. We need to find the other 60%. When you factor in the rent you get over the period, it covers maybe 20% of that. So that still means we need to find 40% of the costs from borrowing or maybe from cross-subsidy. That's the real big difficulty. We do look at different types of social housing. So we have been delivering extra care units, which are not quite as for high needs people as necessarily other types of supported accommodation, but they are homes that are built in a way that it is easier to provide care in them for people that might need it or for people whose care needs might worsen over time. A decent chunk of our programme has included some extra care units that we've developed. We have, I heard some of the discussion earlier about London Living Rent. We have looked at delivering some London Living Rent and we are trying to bring some London Living Rent forward. We've struggled with it for similar reasons as the panel before, where we don't want to have to, the idea of having to sell the home after 10 years is not what we were aiming to do, and we don't want to be in a position of having to move people out after 10 years. We would like to have permanent intermediate rental properties for key workers, which I know, again, is something the GLA is working on. So we haven't brought forward any London Living Rent homes yet, but we are still looking to do some.
Is that roughly the same, or are there some other areas that you would touch on?
Yeah, I mean, London Living Rent is not a product that we've sort of particularly pursued. We, likewise, obviously, because of the challenge and the housing waiting list, our priority is social rent or London affordable rent to help meet the pressures on the housing waiting list and give people a better accommodation. We've explored a little bit of shared ownership. We've got some shared ownership in one of our schemes on site in Wembley at the moment, which we will take on and manage. That will be the first time. So we're sort of cautious trepidation as to how that's going to go. We think there is going to be a market for that in Wembley, but generally, politically, it's not a product that the politicians are particularly keen on. So there is our sort of pragmatic response is that, well, through the planning side of things.
When you say politicians, you mean local Brent politicians?
The councillors. That the but in planning, we'd rather secure a lower quantum of social rent than a greater quantum of intermediate to meet the sort of the definition. So that is our approach, actually.
Okay, and presumably that is to help you meet identified local housing needs. And what impact do you anticipate that government changes to the right to buy and right to buy receipts might have on the total number of affordable homes in your borough, if any? Osama?
Yeah, I think we have a mixed response. So we do not like to lose homes through right to buy. We want to keep homes on our ownership and we want them to stay as affordable homes in perpetuity. So we welcome the reduction in the discount and the changes that are being discussed to make it so that homes only after 35 years can be bought by the new build homes will only be able to be sold after 35 years. It is difficult when you finish a brand new scheme and very quickly afterwards, those homes are being sold. That's difficult. However, use the income we get from Right to Buy is one of the funding sources we can use to build new homes. And if the discount is greatly reduced, it's likely to mean less people do Right to Buy. If the requirements are tighter, it means less likely to do Right to Buy, which means we'll get less money in, which we can then put towards building homes. So I think we like not losing homes to Right to Buy, but we also like having income with which we can build houses. So it's tricky. Yeah, the other complexity
Tiny
is,
bit schizophrenic there.
Yeah. The other complexity is with estate renewal schemes, where we are moving tenants from old properties into new properties. When you go through the estate renewal process, when you know you're about to demolish a home, you issue a demolition notice, which pauses Right to Buy on that block. So often you'll have a lot of people that are very eager to move into their new homes so that they can do their Right to Buy that they've not been able to do while we've been waiting for the phases to move forward and those blocks to be demolished. I wonder if it has been considered how it may be a disincentive for people to want to go through any estate renewal schemes, because if their new build home, they then have to wait 35 years before they can do their Right to Buy. That will probably be a disincentive for a lot of those residents.
So there's a kind of pent-up demand, but the changes might sort of make it more difficult, and they might not want to.
Yes, unless there's any flexibility, particularly related to estate renewal schemes. But again, not that we want to lose those brand new affordable homes to Right to Buy, but it is a thing residents think about and care about.
Alice?
Yeah, I've not had that experience. Actually, reflected back at me on our estate regeneration is in South Kilburn, and it's about halfway through. So we are buying out the leaseholders. We're buying back the properties that we sold to them a long time ago for significantly less amounts of money. So we're paying around sort of 400,000-ish, for each unit that we're buying back. But I haven't noticed any reluctance to. That's a thought process for people moving into the new accommodation. We do have Right to Buy, and likewise, we don't like to lose stock, but it is a freedom that residents have. But because of the land values in the borough, actually, lots of people just can't afford it, even at heavily discounted rates.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. Chair, I'll pass back to you.
Great. I'm just going to come in quickly, just to Summer, just on some of the regeneration and estate demolition schemes. I just wondered, how they fit with how many you've done, how many homes are waiting to, how many homes have been demolished, how many are kind of vacant, and how that kind of plays out within your regeneration work.
Yeah, there's a number of estate renewal schemes we're working on in Southwark, partly because we are the landlord to around 55,000 council homes. There's lots of 55,000 homes, 35,000 of those are for social rent, for council tenancies. A lot of the borough has council estates on it. A lot of those estates were built in the 50s and 60s, and that means just as part of our making sure that all of our residents are in new, modern, safe, secure homes means we need to think about estate renewal as one of the things we do on a fairly wide basis. We currently have 3 estate renewal schemes that are on site in the borough, and there's a few more that are sort of being looked at as potentials that may come forward in the next few years. We are working very hard. We look to try to do an uplift in the number of council homes. We want to make sure that all of the residents that currently live on those estates are able to get new homes on that estate. They stay there. That's both tenants and leaseholders. We work very closely with all of them, and I think that's been very successful. We've got 2 big estate renewal schemes on the Old Kent Road. There's the Tustin Estate and the Ledbury Estate. Both are delivering massive uplifts in council homes and brand new homes for all the people that live there that are going to be much higher quality than the homes that they are moving out of, and they're massively supported by the residents, and that was reflected in the estate regeneration ballots that took place that were supported by the residents.
And is that homes, not just bedrooms? And you have got an increase in number of homes?
Large increase in number of homes, but I guess it is worth saying the reason we've been able to do that is because we have done a huge amount of borrowing within the HRA to support the delivery of those homes. It is not, those schemes are not making the council money. They are a decision the council has made to invest our borrowing into that because of the benefits for our residents and the number of new homes we're able to build through doing it.
That's really helpful. I'm going to go to Assembly Member Moemba for a follow-up.
Thank you, and good morning to both of you. I had a question to both of you on kind of continuing on that point around borrowing and how you're using your HRAs to invest in your own stock. I just wondered, from your borough's perspectives, if there were any additional options or kind of opportunities you'd explored for borrowing or for kind of finding funding. I was thinking of stuff like joint ventures, which some boroughs have tried to varying degrees of success. And I don't know if you have, if you've used the Public Works Loans Board, I think that's what it's called, and kind of borrowing there, how that plays out in your current programmes and how that might be used in the future.
So, yes, we used to use the Public Works Loan Board, but the rates went up quite significantly, I think, didn't they, a few years ago? So I think that's made it harder to use. We get approached, you probably do as well, we get approached regularly with somebody coming up with some lease payback, some kind of scheme. I must admit, the finance sort of lead on those offers because they sort of run the numbers, and we haven't. I know that there are some other boroughs that have. Also, we are told by the people who approach us, but the finance team have not found an offer that they feel is sufficiently attractive for the council to take it on. In terms of sort of joint ventures and things, we have an approach on our South Kilburn estate regeneration. It's redeveloping it for a mixed community, so the model is very much we procure a private developer, we have a development agreement with them, they provide a mix of private homes and affordable homes, so effectively we've got a new mixed tenure community. The numbers on the estate will more than double, and everybody who's on the estate is able to stay on the estate in a new home if they want to. Sometimes they want to move to different parts of the borough, but there will be an uplift in the number of affordable homes on the site by the end of it.
Thank you. Osama?
So we borrow in the HRA from the Public Works Loan Board. That's where almost all of our borrowing is. In some ways, it is not necessarily access to finance because we could borrow from elsewhere, but the borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board is slightly cheaper than most other finance we'd be able to access. The problem is we are borrowing as much as we can already, so it wouldn't matter if we were to find finance from somewhere else. It would just be more borrowing beyond what is safe and comfortable within our HRA. We also have been approached by people with those income strip developments with the idea that you pay a set rent over a period of time. They tend to look good at the start and then cost more, so that they're not necessarily smart ways to get homes built. We do look at different partnerships with developers to also leverage in funding in other ways into developments. We tend in Southwark not to do joint ventures, which would be setting up a separate company with a developer. Instead, we do development partnerships like what was just described, really, where we would sign a development agreement. Some homes would then be funded by the developer. We would put our land in, and then we would get some affordable homes back from that, essentially without having to fund the construction of those homes because we've been putting in our land instead. So we are using that model to fund homes without having to rely on additional borrowing within the HRA.
Thank you.
Thanks. Assemblymember Boff for a quick question.
Yes, very quick. Ms. Lester, you said you were planning, just an explanation really, you were planning to go for less social rent and more intermediate. Could you explain that? What motives for that?
Sorry, if I said that, then I said it wrong.
Well,
no,
I may have heard it wrong, so that's why I've asked for the clarification.
We would prefer less overall quantum of affordable if it was social rent. So we might. This is the planning side of things rather than the council as a housing developer. If a planning application comes in and it's 20% across the board affordable, but most of that is intermediate, we'd say actually we'd rather 15% if more of it is social.
If more of it's social. I'm glad I asked the question because I took grasped the wrong end of the stick there. Is there sufficient flexibility in the affordable housing programme to vary affordable housing 10 years as necessary? I mean, are you content with the flexibility from a local level?
Yes, the flexibility has been helpful. It gives us more scope to flex and adapt and be pragmatic.
Same for you, Mr. Shush.
Yes. Again, the main aim of our development programme is to build council houses for social rent. So where we would look at other types of affordable housing tenures, we have done some shared ownership, is to help with the viability of building council homes largely. Like we do appreciate the value of other intermediate types of affordable housing, but largely that our aim is council homes for social rent, and intermediate is just a small thing we do sometimes as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. To you, Lord Bailey.
Good morning to... Is it still morning? Well, hello to you both. Oh, 2 minutes. Oh, I've just snuck in. Good morning to you both. I'm going to take a slightly different tack. Look, the start target for the 21-26 programme was reduced in May. To what extent do you think this reduced target is realistic? Let me start with Osama.
So in Southwark, it's difficult to speak across the whole programme.
Yeah, just for your own circumstances.
We are still aiming to deliver the homes that we committed to deliver at the start of the programme.
Right.
The reality is that our intentions in 2021, we have had to do huge amounts of work and pause schemes in the interim between then and now because of costs massively shooting up from sort of 2022 onwards, interest rates shooting up and build regulations going up. So it's become much more expensive to build homes than we were planning to do at the start, and our ability to borrow is greatly reduced from 2021 as a result of lots of factors beyond our control. So while we are still looking to deliver those homes, I think, as I said before, that the initial intention would have been that we would have effectively cash flowed those, paid builders to build them for us, whereas now, while we are still doing that with a smaller portion of those homes, much more will be delivered through development partnerships where private developers with our land will help us fund the delivery of those homes. So essentially, we are still looking to deliver the same number of homes. It will just have to be done in different ways because of the cost pressures.
So let me just clarify. So are you saying you're still looking to deliver the original larger target?
The homes that we have committed to with the GLA and the allocations we received.
Right, and is that, has the GLA adjusted that up downward because of their new target, which has been adjusted downwards?
At the start of the bidding period, where we went and had a discussion with the GLA, we talked about our aspirations for the programme. We gave an indicative number of homes that we were expecting to deliver in that programme, and we're still looking to deliver on that. I mean, it is fair to say, that it is more difficult to ensure that they will be delivered as we're getting close to the end of the programme, but we're still intending to deliver the same number of homes we committed to with the GLA.
So you're saying that you feel that the same number of homes are possible, but you're just going to have to find different ways to deliver those homes because viability, etc., has changed, building costs, interest rates.
Yes.
So, but you're at least at this point confident that you can deliver those homes within this time period?
Yes.
Okay. Alice?
No. I don't have the actual figures in my head, but we did have quite a generous grant offer at the start of the programme. It was to deliver over about around 500 of new homes over the period. And so we had the pipeline, and some of these schemes have got planning consent, etc. But some of them are on site and are being delivered. But we do recognise that not all of them are going to be able to be delivered, so we won't be drawing down all of that grant.
Okay. And how have you found? Have you come to that conclusion on your own or with the GLA?
Oh, well, it's regularly discussed with the GLA. As I said, we had the programme meetings sort of regularly, so we run through the numbers and the metrics and the timescales and the possibilities, etc. So we work together on that.
That neatly dovetails into our next question. I'll come back to you, Osama. Has the GLA supported you in the delivery of your targets?
Yeah, very much so. Been very helpful. Where schemes, where costs have increased, they've helped us access safeguarding funds. We've had lots of discussions around how we can best structure the funding arrangements to maximise the money we get in early to help fund the cash flow, the delivery of our schemes. I think the GLA have been very supportive, and we have a very good relationship with them. As I said, we meet with the more operational officers every fortnight. We meet with the more senior people at sort of various quarterly meetings, and it is, I think, generally a good relationship where we work together. Really, we are, working together to deliver the homes that we need to build.
Alice, I ask you the same question, but every time I ask this question, I get an answer around about there. It's not a criticism, but I just want to add something additional, and maybe you might want to come back in, Osama. are there any challenges to working with GLA? Is there something you'd like to change? The answer may be no, it may be yes, but is there something you'd like to change?
I'd like more money, please.
I think I can...
If I can just sort of reiterate, though, what Osama said. So we have found the GLA will be very flexible when we're facing difficulties. So they moved some funding for us from, it was a housing zone programme into the affordable housing programme, so we could access some more when the cost escalations meant that it was going to be challenging. So they've been very flexible, and they, as I sort of said in my opening, I think we all want to achieve the same thing, so they will help where they possibly can.
Yeah, we generally get that message back that the GLA are very willing and capable and willing to help. What proportion of the affordable homes you're building are relying on grant?
The vast majority, if not all.
Okay. Alice?
Yeah, the vast majority. We've got one scheme on site in Edgware Road, which is for temporary accommodation, 120 units, and that's not being grant funded. I can't remember it was to do with something else that was being funded that was linked to it. But yeah, we're borrowing and taking the hit on that.
Do the 35% and the 50% targets in the housing threshold for affordable housing in the London plan, are they a challenge? Are they a good thing, a bad thing? Are they too broad? Would you like to be able to focus them on particular sites in different ways? How does that affect your ability to deliver?
It's a complicated answer, I think, because, like I say, what we want to build is council housing, but because of the cost pressures and the requirement and the limited borrowing we're able to put into it, and the fact that grant funds 30 to 40% of the cost, we need to get additional money to build those houses. We do have to look at delivering private homes too, often through development partnerships, and it is a challenge in the market at the moment to deliver 50% affordable housing on sites. One of the things I would change is the additionality rules, where if you are not building 100% affordable housing, 20% of those affordable homes are not allowed to be grant funded by the GLA under the additionality rules in the current programme. And that is a big disincentive from, there's no reason to deliver 60% affordable housing, because you would then need to maximise the amount of funding you get in to cover the 20% not funded. Have I explained that clearly enough? But basically, a proportion of, if you're building 100 homes on a site, if 100 of those are council homes, they'll all be able to receive grant funding. If less than 100 are council homes, then say you did 50% private, 50% council homes, 20% of those council homes could not be funded by the GLA grant under the additionality rules. And that means that you are under massive pressure to get as much money as you can from those private homes to help fund the affordable homes that are then not getting any grant funding. So whereas we may want to do a mix of different percentages of homes on sites, it becomes very difficult to do, say, 70% affordable homes on site, because we lose grant funding on the 20% of the homes that are not funded, and we need to maximise the income we get in from them. So essentially, we either do 100% and get all the grant, or we do 50% or to maximise the amount of money we get in to fund those homes. And it is challenging at the moment, and I think we will be struggling to deliver 50% affordable homes on some of the sites as they come forward in our development partnerships. It will be very difficult.
Can I just say, Osama, your explanation was excellent. I've really got it now, thank you. I asked you again the same question as what proportion of the homes you're delivering are grant funded, your affordable homes?
Yeah, most of them, aside from the temporary accommodation block that we're building up in the north of the borough, we're very reliant on the grant.
And again, the 35 and the 50% affordable housing in any given scheme, how are you finding that?
At the moment, if I look broadly across the piece, so it's the private sector-led schemes that are coming in, I don't think there is any scheme that comes in at 35% affordable housing, unless it's a registered provider or it is the council's own scheme. But in terms of most affordable housing is delivered via the private sector rather than the public sector building at the moment. That's just the way it has been for an awful long time. So I don't think we get 35%. To meet the fast track rule at the GLA without a viability assessment, we just don't get that quantum. My personal view is that cross-subsidy model of providing affordable housing via the private sector is broken, because they can't afford it either. with the building costs. So we get schemes in with a lower amount of affordable housing, and then there's a negotiation, and the viability work gets carried out, and we have end up with a negotiated position on a scheme, but it's rarely 35%.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me go to my last question. What do you predict will be the key challenges in meeting the 21-26 programme completion targets by March 2030? What would you like the GLA to do to support you in meeting that target?
Yeah, completion targets are difficult, and I think it's sort of. I'm not sure it pays attention to the way we are incentivised to build. When we start building a home, we want to finish it as quickly as possible. But having a completion target adds an additional element of risk, because we have had contractors that go bust on site, and that's already very difficult to deal with. To get a new contractor in to take over, you're already trying to get it going as quickly as possible to make sure you're not spending lots more money. But if there is an additional risk that unless you get started within a certain amount of time, you'll lose your grant funding because you miss a completion target, that's an extra element of risk that is difficult. It also makes getting grant funding in for multi-phased, estate renewal schemes tricky, because if every home has to be completed by a certain date, but you're looking at a development that requires you to build a block, move residents from that block, into it, then demolish old homes to build a second block where that original old block was, that will take, 4, 5, 6 years.
Can I just ask you, would it be possible, because I'm always thinking of recommendations we could make to the Mayor and the government, would it be possible to ask them to just give that flexibility? Is there an actual reason why they will not provide that flexibility?
Well, as I understand it, there isn't flexibility allowed under the current rules, but it would be helpful if there was more flexibility.
So it would be a case of just having the current rules changed?
I think it makes sense to have something. Nobody wants homes to not be built as quickly as possible. Regardless of a completion target, we would want to get homes completed as quickly as possible because we want to get our residents in them to reduce our temporary accommodation costs and to make sure people are securely housed. And I guess having the ability where there are particular difficulties or more complicated schemes, some flexibility would be helpful.
Yeah, I think, Chair, we might want to look at that as a recommendation. Alice, again, do I need to remind you a question, Alice?
No, I don't know that I've got anything more to add really. I mean, flexibility and quick decisions on safeguarding requests, etc., to enable us to crack on. But nothing really further to add.
In the last session, there was a comment made about cash flow, about when the grants are actually paid, and apparently they're sort of paid in 2 tranches, and the smaller RPs said they'd like a third, halfway through. Would that support your situation, or was it different for you?
I would say it's less of a problem for us. I mean, we already get the majority of grant when we start on site and then a smaller percentage on completion. I think it's slightly different depending on the different funding programmes. I think it's 75% on start on site and 25% on completion under the current AHP. That work. I mean, we would always like more money up front. I think effectively that means we have to borrow less, and like I say, we are never going to start a home and not finish it because we desperately want them finished so people can live in them. So I would be in favour of an increased percentage available at start on site and less available on completion. I do understand that the GLA would want to make sure that things are completed and want to have some amount of money held back until completion, but my view would be there's no reason it shouldn't be 80-90% at start on site.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I must admit, I thought it was 50-50, so you got 50 at start and 50 later, which was different from the earlier affordable housing programme where I think it was 90-10. Again, I agree, you never pay your builder up front, 100% up front, but so you can understand that. But yeah, obviously, more money in the bank earlier reduces the costs to the council.
Okay, thank you. Chair, back to you.
Great, and I'm just going to quickly welcome, we've got Wickham Primary School from Brent. So hello everybody. Lots of you, it's great. So we've got, so Alice is a council officer in Brent, so that's why we're welcoming you, and then Osama from Southwark. And I'm just handing over to Assemblymember Baker for some more questions.
Thanks, Chair. So, how do you ensure that the affordable homes delivered in your borough align with the local housing needs?
In some ways, the housing need is very intense. So there we have around 18,000 families on our housing waiting list, and we've got just under 4,000 families in temporary accommodation. I think we're at 3,800. So there is huge pressure for all types of council homes. We do work closely with our allocations teams to look at sort of where that pressure is most and try to design our schemes to deliver the homes we most need. Essentially, any type of council housing is desperately needed, so any homes we build meet our housing need.
Okay, so sorry, just before I come to you, Alice. So I said affordable. You said council. Do you mean social rent? So how do you ensure that your affordable homes meet the need, which, from what you said, is just for social homes?
Yes.
We'll come back to the actual type of homes in a second, but yes. So.
Yes, more widely, yes, I think there is need in Southwark for other types of intermediate housing for people that can't afford to buy privately or can't afford private rents. But essentially, the council is focused on building council homes for those most in housing need.
Yeah. And what processes do you use to ensure that is what you get, is what I'm asking?
Well, that's one of the reasons we have a development programme where we try to build. I mean, the aim of our development programme is to build as many council homes as we can. Mm-hmm. So we are trying to meet the need ourselves by using our land and our resources to build council homes. I'm not in the planning team, but obviously also through planning we look to maximise the number of affordable homes that get delivered by the private sector too. Essentially, yeah, we
social or affordable. Sorry, I would just need to be really clear.
With our development programme, our aim is to build council homes for social rent, and that's what we aim to build as much of as possible.
Yes.
Through planning, again, the preference is for social rented homes, but also other types of affordable housing, more intermediate affordable housing is also delivered through the planning system.
Okay, thanks. Alice?
Yeah, I mean, we work together. The housing team housing doesn't sit with me, but we work very closely. So when our property team sort of find sites, council sites that we think have got development potential, we work with the housing colleagues to work out what might be best provided there. Similarly, everything will be occupied by somebody who's in need of the housing. We have a particular pressure for larger units, so sort of at least 3 or sort of 4, sometimes even 5-bed homes, and they are difficult and expensive to build. But we do a combination of, using our expertise to look at the sites, look at the demand, look at the costs, and we come up with a scheme. But yeah, I mean, all housing units, social housing units that we deliver, will come to good use and provide somebody with a transformational home.
Sure. And so, yeah, that's what I was going to come on to in terms of the size of the homes, so family-size homes with multiple bedrooms. So what are the processes by which you can ensure maximising that? So you've said that is what you do, but we
have a series of governance boards. So we have an Affordable Housing and Supply Board, which meets monthly, and that reports into the Capital Programme Board. So, when we've got sites that we're working on, we'll go through the board, which has representatives from sort of finance, housing, regeneration, planning, property on it.
And so that will look at the schemes and sort of
and make a decision
if enough is being done to make sure that the right size of homes for the need.
Supported living as well will be part of that equation. But and that board will come to a view as to whether it's a viable project that we want to progress, and then we'll take that through the Capital Programme Board and eventually the Cabinet.
So, Salma, back to you in terms of family-sized homes, with larger numbers of bedrooms.
Similarly, we have internal boards that we report on our programme to that look at what is being built to make sure that we're maximising, addressing the need. We try to build as many family-sized homes as possible. A bit more than 2/3 of our programme is family-sized homes. That includes 2s, 3s, but also 4s and 5s. Even though they're very expensive and difficult to build, we've got the need. We need to build them. The current funding regime doesn't acknowledge, it's the same grant you get for a 5-bedroom home as a 1-bedroom home. Rents are also not proportional to the additional cost, and that makes sense because just because you need a 5-bedroom home doesn't mean you can afford to pay more rent than someone in a 1-bedroom home. But what that means is it's a much more pressure on the HRA. Basically, we have to do much more borrowing to build a 5-bed than we would have to do to build a 1-bed, and that's tricky. Potentially, if funding was provided on a habitable room basis, or with uplift for larger units, that might be something that would make it much easier to build family-size homes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And do understand that pressure in terms of making those decisions. Is there any way that, from us from the outside, you can, illustrate to us how you make that decision in terms of, yes, we could deliver a larger number of units, but 1 or 2 bedrooms, we need larger homes. Literally, how do you make, or how do your boards make those decisions? Can you illustrate that for us in any way?
I can a bit. So under the Southwark local plan, there are targets for a bed size split that we try to work with, and those targets generally do incentivise us to limit the number of 1 beds we would want to build. Often when we are delivering projects, we have housing need in mind. Either we are building an infill block on an estate and we know the housing need on the estate. We have lots of families that might be in overcrowded conditions, and part of that would factor in what we're looking to build. Or if we're doing an estate renewal scheme where there's people moving directly from old homes into new homes, that will again inform how we design those homes. I mean, we're very aware in our development team of the huge pressure of homeless families and people in housing need in our borough. So, we're always looking to maximise the number of larger homes we can do, but that is constrained by the costs. So essentially, it's just us having conversations based on what we know about housing need to try to balance that, the various pressures.
Yeah, and so in some cases, you're not building for specific families, but you're building for subsections of communities and going, well, we know this estate or this area.
So, for example, we might know that on an estate there were, 20 families that were overcrowded, and we would know roughly what type of bed sizes they would need. So that would influence the design of an infill block we'd build on that estate.
Yeah. No. Alice, is there anything you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'd sort of describe it as a matrix approach, I suppose. So when we are discussing proposals, it will be, well, we could do this with X number of this and X number of that, and the cost of that will be this, or we could do different X's and different numbers, and we'll just use our expertise to come to make a judgment call. I'll give you one example. It's on one of the sites in the South Kilburn Estate Regeneration area. It's a mixed-use scheme. It's our community and enterprise hub, but we're also building a small block of 18 new homes. 4 of those are 4-bed flats, and they take up a whole floor plate. So that just sort of meant that the physicality of the site, the size of the site, lent itself to delivering 4-bed homes on one per floor, and then the remainder on the other floors. The reason it's 4, not 5 or 6, is probably because of finance and wanting a mixture of sizes.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm just going to say, we've only got 20 minutes left.
Oh,
so if we can all... No, it's fine. I know you've got a couple more, but
sorry, I was going to try and... Yeah, right. I'll speed up.
But we can also ask questions afterwards.
Apologies, right. I'll try and rattle through the next 2 questions quicker. Okay. And can you talk us through how you ensure that you build accessible and the right number of accessible homes for people who might need disabled access?
I think it's something that we see as really important. We have planning requirements, and we have requirements under the GLA funding conditions to deliver a percentage of homes that are adapted, and we do 10% of our homes are fully adapted, and that's just sort of a standard that we do in all of our developments.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'd say as a responsible social landlord, it's just what you'd want to do. You wouldn't want to do otherwise, and then the planning and the conditions ensure that you do.
Thank you. And what's been the impact of negotiated grant rates under the Affordable Homes Programme 21-26 on your delivery?
Again, I would say...
I'm trying to spice up the questions, but,
I would say mixed. It is helpful to have higher grant rates. The more money we get, the better. Yeah. However, I do think there are some... I think in some ways it makes boroughs... approach each other in a more competitive way.
Right.
Essentially, we don't know what grants others are getting officially,
right.
And it makes it harder, I think, to then directly compare development programmes, harder to share knowledge and to benchmark against each other. And I think it can be slightly counterproductive, because essentially we're not in competition. I am not looking to build council homes in Brent. I just want to build them in Southwark. And us being able to have a bit more of a transparent and standardised funding approach, I think, would be more helpful in that regard. So where we are able to negotiate higher grant rates, great. Where it feels as if it is trying to introduce competition into kind of where we don't really need it, I think it can be a bit.
Yeah, so you're saying there is sometimes you might think if we negotiate this rate, then we might just not get the money and they might just go to, no offence, Brent.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
And I think if it was a funding regime where it was much more transparent, where essentially there was like a base funding rate, but then uplift elements for inner London boroughs, estate renewal schemes, more expensive schemes, I think that would just be a much more transparent way and would help you plan a programme at the start, because you wouldn't be thinking, oh, well, if we get this level of grant, this will work. If we don't, it won't. You'd just be able to plan a programme based on what you know you'd get.
Thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I agree for all of that around sort of certainty and knowing, you know, it would make it much easier to plan and sort of less risky, I suppose. But at the same time, you know, sometimes we've done quite well out of negotiated rates, so we've you know, benefited from having that ability. So it's a bit swings and roundabouts. I'm not sure I come down either way, really.
No, that's helpful. Your experience is helpful. Thanks. Back to you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Boffer, a very quick question. I promise.
Extremely quick, yes. Mr. Shush, you said that if the grant funding could be by room, that may be an incentive to build more family-sized homes. I don't want to misquote you, so I want to just ensure that that's what you did say.
And often, for planning purposes, affordable housing is measured on habitable rooms, essentially for that reason, because there can be benefits from building 4 or 5 bedroom homes. And I understand the simplicity of explaining a grant. You want to be able to say this amount of money has funded this amount of homes, but it does incentivise you to build smaller homes. If a smaller home is cheaper to build.
I always call it, they subsidise front doors, not rooms. So it's how many front doors you subsidise at the moment. But if they subsidise by rooms, there might be an incentive, therefore, to build larger properties. Is that correct?
Yes.
And would that apply to yourself, Ms. Lester?
Great. Over to you, Assemblymember Moema.
Thank you. My question to both of you, across the 2 programmes that we've had, there have been lots of new rules and guidance that have been introduced, building safety being a key one, and other issues like design and sustainability. I also note, and I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this particular question, but whether or not the potential access to building safety grant funding, it has freed up money, but that's a slightly separate topic. But I just wonder, in terms of building safety, design and sustainability across the 2 programmes, what has been your experience?
So I think we are supportive of all of those standards, and we want to build fantastic council homes that are, you know, wonderful places for residents to live in. And I would say the vast majority, if not all, of the GLA requirements are things that from our Southwark standards and what we would look to deliver anyway. So in some ways it is not any additional burden or any additional task to have to prove to the GLA we're meeting those requirements beyond to the administration of passing that information over. So we're very supportive of all of those additional standards and targets. It's not really a problem for us to do them. We were doing them anyway. In some ways, you know, the more additional requirements there are in a funding programme, essentially just increases the admin workload for us to get those grants in. I don't want to overemphasise that, but basically we were doing it anyway. I would think that most councils are anyway. You know, it's what we want to do. We're the landlord of those homes. We care about the people that live in them. We want them to be fantastic. The point on the Building Safety Fund, I think probably we're still working through at the moment exactly what, you know, how it will impact to the HRA. I think there's so many pressures on the HRA. There's been some good news in terms of the announcements of having certainty on rent for 10 years, various other factors I think are going to be beneficial. I think it's too early to say exactly what additional capacity that might unlock for new building at the moment, hopefully, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, we do want to build good homes that are future-proofed and of good quality and are energy efficient, and so you can address fuel poverty and lots of these other things. So I'd never want to sort of argue against raising standards, really, but I think the planning system is just so now overburdened with the expectation that it delivers on everything, really, that I think there has to be a recognition that does come at a cost. And meeting the sort of both the statutory and the non-statutory but desirable sort of standards, it raises the bar for quality, absolutely, but, it comes with extra obligations and extra design work and, you know, possibly extra costs. Not always extra costs. Design doesn't necessarily have to cost more. But I think, you know, some recognition that meeting the statutory regulations, you know, particularly with the existing housing stock and things, it has a big impact on the HRA.
Thank you. And to both of you, again, what do you think has worked well in the design and administration of the Affordable Homes programmes? Again, I would like just, the two were designed differently, 21 to 23 and 23 to 26. What's worked well and what could be carried over and what could be dropped, you know, frankly?
I think the ability to get higher grant rates is something that's great. You know, we want as much grant as we get. The more money we get, the more homes we build. It is as simple as that. We'd like as much as possible. I think there are some additional rules that limit flexibility in this new programme that are difficult. We've mentioned the completion dates. And again, it's not because we don't want to complete, it's that it's just an additional risk we need to worry about in bringing those homes forward. The having to name schemes early in a programme and work towards delivering those, it's tricky, but I think that's probably been a fairly consistent thing across the different funding programmes. We appreciate, I mean, there was a period where we could not get funding for replacement homes on estate renewal. I think it's great that that is now funded in the current programme, and we want to make sure that that's maintained. A lot of the homes we build are through estate renewal, and if we can't fund replacement units, we won't be able to do those. Yeah, I think that's probably it.
I think it's worked pretty well. You know, the previous session sort of referred to the challenges of the Opus system, but, you know, which I think I don't have direct contact involvement with that, but I think from colleagues they would sort of support the view that it is quite cumbersome and it would be nicer if it was a bit more efficient, but obviously can understand why the GLA need that level of information. I think, yeah, the flexibility and the willingness of the GLA to sort of help move things and support is good. It's been really good. I think there are some tweaks. So, yeah, more earlier forward funding in the next round would be helpful. I think the idea of bedrooms, not or bed spaces, not or bedroom habitable rooms, not units, would be a helpful one. I do think we probably need to look at grant applicability to the Section 106 scheme, so below the sort of 35% threshold, because, you know, developers are just saying we just can't build without some help. So you might need to look at that in the future. What else? Sorry. Oh, and London affordable rent, I think. Moving away from social rent, even though we all want to deliver social rent, the financial realities are we need a bit more of the rental income.
So using London affordable rent as the standard, is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I think it would be negotiated, wouldn't it? And it might be a 10-year split between social rent and London affordable rent. I mean, all these things are sort of discussions to be had.
Just some additional asks, I think, on what would make the funding programme better. Funding, if in some ways it was simplified and effectively we could get funding for every council home we build would be appreciated. So we struggle with not being able to use our right to buy money to combine with the grant we get. Essentially, it is money we have in our account that we are not allowed to spend when it's combined with GLA grant. And that means that we have to use borrowing or other cross-subsidy to fund unit costs. The additionality is very difficult where we are trying to do that cross subsidy, where we then lose out on getting grant funding. That is a big problem. Generally, I think councils are heavily incentivised to build council housing because of the need, and I think that there should be more flexibility from the GLA to help us do that.
Thanks, that's really, really well covered. Just a few questions from me. Just to go back to estate renewal or regeneration, I'm quite interested in the dynamic where residents are moved out and there's kind of empty council homes. So I know that Aylesbury's got a number of formal council homes that are empty, and I just wondered if you could describe a bit around that dynamic of the pressure that puts on kind of supply and demand overall, and how that's kind of looked at in those schemes.
Yeah, it's tricky. There are empty homes on the Aylesbury estate. effectively, you can imagine, as you are moving residents out of a block to move them into new homes, it can take quite a long time to move residents. There can be various factors that mean some people are unable or unwilling to move. And when you start to get down to, there can be particular issues with leaseholders where you're trying to negotiate agreements with them to purchase back their properties that can take a very long time. And you are then potentially left with a smaller number of residents in a block with lots of empty homes surrounding them. And there are then discussions on, is it sensible to bring them back into use for things like temporary accommodation for an interim period or not? And some of that comes down with the unpredictability of the amount of time it might take to conclude negotiations with particular residents to move them out. So essentially, you are trying to balance the uncertainty of how long a block will take to move people out of, if you're working with them closely and trying to properly support them to move, against the pressure that having empty homes left on that estate would cause. And, empty homes are not good. We don't want empty homes. We want every home we have filled, either with temporary accommodation or with permanent council residents. So, and it can attract antisocial behaviour when there's properties that are empty for a long time. So our intention is always to absolutely reduce the number of empty homes we have and absolutely get people moved as quickly as possible into modern new homes. Particularly, the Aylesbury is a good example because some of the homes there are not of good quality, and that's one of the reasons why that estate is being renewed, because the homes that were built then have, they're quite old now, there's maintenance issues, and we want to have everyone living there in modern, high-quality housing.
I think I've got lots more questions on that, but I'm going to... Alice,
I just very quickly like to talk about South Kilburn in that respect, because this is a long-term estate regeneration programme. We did a big exercise about 18 months ago to look at the voids across the estate, and as a result of that, we moved about 52, I think, temporary accommodation families into these. These are the blocks that are in a reasonably good condition, so it might be leaseholders or where just tenants have just moved on. So they're in quite a good condition, so we didn't have to spend a lot of money sort of enabling them to be occupied. And these blocks are likely to be at the end of the regeneration programme, so we know we've probably got about 5 to 8 years that the temporary accommodation people can stay there. So that's been really good. But we do have other blocks which are, the ones that are likely to be demolished soon, and they are mostly decanted but not completely. Part of the problem is we wanted to avoid double decants for people, so we wanted to be able to move them into their new homes, but the new home delivery, it takes a while. So we are having to look at some double decants, but the families that are in the blocks at the moment tend to need 4 or 5 bedroom homes, and we're just struggling to find somewhere that they are. But so one of the other pressures is until a block is decommissioned, so at the moment it's still Brent Housing land, there are a number of voids. The council still has to pay council tax. I know it's the council paying itself, but it's another pressure on the HRA, and it's only when we completely decommission the block and turn the taps off, basically, that council tax isn't due. So that's a bit of a tension and a struggle there. But the cost of making them good to put TAs in is just not viable.
I think you've both described the whole process of all the things that need to go into consideration around those kind of developments, haven't you? In terms of, moving people out to other accommodation where they wait for their right to return, and then other temporary accommodation people moving in, and how that gets assessed from the beginning, and making sure that that's kind of the best for everybody. I'm aware we're almost running out of time. Is it on this?
Yes, I do. Yeah, it is.
Because I really want to ask about acquisitions.
But it is on this.
Okay, if you're really quick.
So can you explain? So the council has to pay additional council tax, because obviously if you move that family somewhere else, aren't you just paying council tax where they are, not where they were?
On the empty units, we still have to pay council tax.
So you pay council tax on the empty unit, and then on the unit you then...
Well, but the person pays the council tax, don't they?
Okay, because it seems bizarre that... Okay, thank you. I'm clear now. I'm clear. Thank you.
So, just quickly on the Mayor's Council Home acquisition programme, which we haven't really touched on, I just wondered if you could speak a bit to your experiences with that. I know, Alice, you were mentioning it right at the beginning, and just if there's any difference between that and the previous scheme, the Right to Buy Back programme. And I'm particularly interested in whether the grant rate is sufficient to allow you to do the acquisitions you need to, so the buying back the private homes.
We have, on the previous right to buyback programme, bought properties. We haven't done, I don't think, any, or at least very few, under the CHAPS programme. We are looking at doing some more, but I think it is difficult to make the numbers add up. We haven't been able to make it work so far.
So the acquisitions I referred to earlier are from the Affordable Housing Programme, where we've got grants on them, but we also have some CHAPS. I think it's about 40 properties, and we are on track to meet that by the March 26 deadline. The problem is that it's capped, isn't it? I think it's 200,000 per unit, which just doesn't buy the size of the homes that are really needed. So whilst we are making use of it, it's not addressing the pressing need for larger sized units.
Yeah, is that nodding from? Yeah, is
and,
that what,
and there's,
making it better? Yeah,
yeah.
easier.
Sorry, it's just capital, so there's no ongoing financial commitment to adding them to the housing stock.
Yeah, I was going to ask how to make it more accessible, but that, I think you've described that well. We have another couple of questions, but we'll send those in writing if that's all right, just to get some more responses. Thank you so much. We filled that time really easily because I think there's so much to cover. Thank you so much for your honesty and for sharing your experiences. We've got a couple more bits of business to do, but if you do need to run off, then you do. Just asking the committee if you note the report about and today's discussion. Noted. And you also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the discussion. Item number 6, can you note the committee's work programme? And the date of the next meeting is the 9th of September, where we'll continue this discussion with our GLA colleagues, or people from the GLA, 10 a.m. here on the 9th of September. I don't have any urgent business, so I declare the meeting closed.
This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.